Kalani Sitake is officially staying at BYU, and while that was never going to be great for Utah with him coming back, it's actually even worse than you might think now, unfortunately.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first view and listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Huge shout out to our everydayers. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. My name is J.T. Wistrcill, excited to be joined by Heisman voter and national college football writer for CBS Sports, Shehan Jeyarajah. We're going to talk about Utah in the college football playoff rankings, falling again despite a win. Also talk about what is all just going on with this whole Kalani Sitake situation, because that's where I want to start, John. I mean, looking at this situation, it's wild. He was going to go to Penn State. Now he's back. And it's like, okay, well, we know BYU is going to continue to be good. That's fine. And we knew that was going to happen. Well, whenever you're wanted, like Penn State wanted him, BYU had to give him more to incentive to stay. And they did that. They're going to increase their NIL by a lot, actually, based on some of these reports. BYU is committing 10 to 15 million in NIL per reports from On3. So I think this is really concerning for Utah now that BYU, who's already in a better place, they landed a top 20 recruiting class coming up. And now they're going to have even more funds, and they're keeping their elite coach. This is not good for Utah, honestly.
No, and like you said, I mean, they had a plan in place if he were to decide to leave. I mean, I think that sort of the expectation over there was that Jay Hill would just kind of be promoted from defensive coordinator to head coach. Obviously, so many people in this program very familiar to Utah fans, I'm sure. But, obviously him sticking around, I think, is a big deal. You mentioned the commitments. Like, there's no question, of course, that BYU has some money available to them. The question was going to be how much and how available was it going to be? And the answer ends up being a lot. And, it's interesting. You mentioned it kind of off the top. Like, when you look at BYU, they haven't really ever had good recruiting classes, right? Yeah. Like they usually are in the 40s or 50s, and they do a good job of filling holes and developing and, kind of having a long-term plan for their program. And this was the first year that it started to change. Top 20 class, like you mentioned, I believe 6 kids in the top 247, obviously 5-star quarterback Ryder Lyons coming in. And then you get the infusion of cash. I think that this is definitely going to make for an interesting dynamic. Now, let's be clear about this, right? Like, Utah is also very well funded. They also do a great job. They also have a staff in place that they feel really good about. They have recruited at a high level, not just for 1 or 2 years, but for a decade at this point. And so that's still going to be the case. They're still going to be fine. But yeah, it's definitely a different kind of complication than what they've dealt with before.
Yeah, it just feels like, look, BYU's in the top 15 right now. I mean, if they're willing to give, I don't know if they exactly match the offer. It sounds like he would have still made more had he gone to Penn State. But the fact that they can get in that ballpark, the fact that they're going to continue to fund this roster the way they are, means BYU, it doesn't sound like they're Texas Tech NIL-wise right now, but they might very clearly be the second best in the Big 12. And that means if you're Utah and you've now lost to BYU 3 years in a row, I just wonder how many times Utah and BYU are going to match up moving forward. And going into that game, Utah is going to be the higher ranked team. It feels like those days could be behind us. It's obviously possible. Utah's got some good things in place still, but man, just BYU is positioning themselves with the changes that are happening in college football. Cougars just continue to put themselves among the best. And like we said, Utah can still compete with BYU. They're right there. I mean, neutral site game between those two this year. It even could have been a different result, right? But BYU just feels like they're really set up for the future. And as someone who covers Utah and went to Utah, that concerns me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's huge, right? And I think that also, obviously you talk about sort of long-term stability. The thing for Utah, of course, they have a coach in waiting, so you expect that it's going to be a clean transition. But, this is kind of the early end of the Kalani Sitake era, right? Whereas, for Kyle Whittingham, it's like if you go back 10, 15 years ago, getting to know that you're getting another 10 to 15 years, that's huge. And that's kind of where BYU is at right now. You think that with a sort of a swing like Penn State took, like this, I'm sure was the moment that he really sat down and thought about it. Do I want to be at BYU my whole career? Do I want to only be here? Do I want to never go anywhere else? Like this was that moment. Penn State is one of the elite jobs in college football. They've won national championships, obviously, right after, ironically, BYU did as well.
Yeah.
But, this is Kalani Sitake is only 50 years old. He has 10 to 15 more years left in him. And with a staff that I assume will be getting raises as well. I mean, this is going to be a program that Utah has to deal with for a very long time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like we said, yes, Utah BYU, it's always a great rivalry. It's been a great rivalry, but the Cougars continue to have better resources for what the future of college football will be. So that's where it's interesting for Utah. And then we now officially know that Kalani Sitake staying at BYU. But then we go over to Utah and we're still waiting on kind of Kyle Whittingham. What's going to happen there? I feel like this is going to be it for him. Just, you went 10-2, right? Like, how do you end better than that? Especially because, look, it's just going to be hard for Utah to be better than they were last year because next year, than they were this year, because their offensive line is going to completely turn over. And that was the best part of this team. Because I still expect it to be a very good team, but 10 wins are not easy. Like, even as great as Kyle was, he did it 8 times. Like, there's still a lot of years in those 22 where you don't get to 10 wins. So it's going to be tough sledding next year. I think it will be Morgan Scalley's first year running the Utah Utes next year. Do you think this is it for Kyle? And how do you think Morgan will do when he gets his shot?
Yeah, I do think that this is probably it for Kyle. Like you said, I mean, to get to 10 wins, to be a top 15 team, to have an opportunity to maybe win an 11th game as well. Like, it's a really great season. It's a really great career for Kyle Whittingham. And I think that, there, obviously he's spoken in the past about not wanting to coach past 65. Well, he made it to 65 because he didn't want to go out on 5-7. But I think that you can feel really good if you're Kyle Whittingham about 10-2. Like, I think that you can feel really good about the state of the program, about solidifying a system in place from a strength and conditioning standpoint, from a defensive perspective, obviously bringing in an offensive staff that I think is going to be, a huge part of this program for years to come. Like, I think that more than anything else, Coach Whittingham did not want to leave behind a rebuilding job for Morgan Scalley. But I mean, you mentioned it. Like, this is probably not going to be a team that next year is winning the Big 12. They had again, they were competitive with just about everybody to win the Big 12 this year. They had a chance. They put themselves in position. They put themselves in the position to be in the playoffs. And I think that so much of rosters these days just comes down to timing and right place, right time, developmental curves, all this sort of stuff. And this was a program at the top of their developmental curve. Next year might be a little bit different.
It very well might be. It's just really hard. Like literally all 5 offensive linemen. Spencer Fano might be the best offensive lineman in the country. Like, losing that it's a lot to replace. And obviously
we've gone through picking some All-America teams. I would expect to see Spencer Fano on many of them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. An All-American you have to replace there. And it's, like we said, the rest of the starters too, probably gone. And also transfer portal era coming up. At this time last year, it was like, well, Keanu Tanavasa will come back. Cameron Calhoun will come back at cornerback. And that didn't happen. So a lot to change with these rosters, but we are still on this season, although there is a reason we're talking about some next year things. Utah is on the outside looking into the college football playoff, and they only continue to move down the rankings. They won, but continue to fall. How should we feel about that? We're going to talk about it in one moment. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines to adjust to instantly, player prop updates as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. And it's not just the NFL. Of course, college football rolling on with the playoff just around the corner and conference championship weekend coming up. College basketball, lots of big games there in the non-conference slate, and the NBA too. So if you want to ride in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you when you head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Woodward. We're just going to say it. The fun per foot ratio at Woodward Park City is second to none. Located just 20 minutes from the Salt Lake Valley, Woodward offers experiential learning in a radically fun and safe environment with facilities for all abilities. The doors always open to first-timers and regulars alike. Bounce from park to pits, ramps to tramps, and back again. Mountain Park season passes are now on sale for just $499. Rip hot laps with a posse after school and into the evening. Maximize mountain time this winter at one of the best terrain parks in Utah all season long. Looking to go all in, the All Access membership provides just that, from passes to perks, discounts, and more. Just starting out, learn to fly with Woodward Tribe in seasonal and multi-week programs that build skills and confidence in a Stoke-inspiring environment. Just 20 minutes from Salt Lake, Woodward offers experiential learning with facilities for all abilities. Learn more at woodwardparkcity.com today. The Utah Utes continue to tumble in the latest college football rankings. They're down to 15. They've won 2 weeks in a row, but they've fallen. I'm frustrated, but in a way, Shehan, I understand it. If you were to say who's better right now, Texas or Utah, I'd be willing to say Texas. If you were willing to say who's better right now, Vandy or Utah, I'd probably concede Vandy. Utah has not looked good over these last couple weeks defensively. Offensively, still been impressive, but defensively, which what a upside down world we live in, where the Utah offense is what we're talking about now. But I understand it. Like I said, it's just frustrating because you win and you fall, but we're talking about 10-2 teams, or in Texas's case, 9-3, but that loss, one, the non-conference one, the big one, on the road to Ohio State. So I get the reason they're falling. It is still just frustrating to win and fall, though. Do you feel like Utah's fairly ranked?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, when you start getting to the point of multi-loss teams in general, right? Like,
Yeah.
it starts to become like you're being positioned kind of fluid in relation to other teams, right? Like, them moving down is more about what Texas did and what Vanderbilt did than what they didn't do. And one of the kind of frustrations for Utah this season is ultimately that, like, a lot of their good games were early. They haven't had a huge opportunity to rebuild up their resume in the final month of the year. So I think it's probably the right place to be. I mean, look, all this said, I think that the College Football Playoff Committee gave Utah a tremendous amount of respect for most of this process. I mean, obviously, they're a team that ranked really well in the advanced metrics, that took care of business, had very high game control metrics, for example. But I think that when you start comparing resumes, the reality is, right? I mean, it's like what we're talking about with Notre Dame. Utah played two really good teams, and they lost to both of them. And I think that probably just put a ceiling on where they'd be able to go.
Yeah, and even in Notre Dame, right? Those two losses by a combined, I think it's 4 points, right?
Yeah.
And we less said about the Tech losses. That final score, that one the better for the Utah Utes. And that's what kind of BYU's dealing with right now, which we could talk about that in a moment. But it is an interesting conversation it's a very subjective criteria list. Obviously, the committee has to choose from, so that draws a lot of controversy. But I can respect in the conversation of, okay, let's look at these teams' best wins. Unfortunately, with Arizona State losing last week and Cincinnati's free fall continuing the last few weeks, Utah doesn't have a ranked win right now. So that's going to hurt you. Vandy, I don't think Tennessee's not ranked right now, but I still put a lot of respect in that win. They won that game by 20 at the end. Only losses are to Bama, as well as the other one was I just blanked out. Texas.
Was Texas.
Yeah, that's why Texas is above them. And Texas, yeah, not a great Florida loss, but you beat A&M and you beat Vandy, as we just mentioned. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to lean to the good wins and also how you're playing as of late. Now, there's examples of where playing as late can be a little interesting, the whole Miami Notre Dame thing. But as it relates to Utah, like we said, I just don't think anyone would fear this Utah team right now. And honestly, I would not want to see this rush defense go against a top 12 just team in general, especially one with a good running back like Utah versus Notre Dame right now. Oh, I love the Utes, but I don't want to see that with Shahad. I don't know how that one would work out for us.
Well, hey, coincidentally, I just got off the phone with Jeremiah Love today, so keep your eyes out for a story on him next week. But yeah, I mean, I do think that this Utah team is so interesting because I think that they execute at such a high level, right? Like, I think that they, especially offensively, I mean, they're able to bully teams, they're able to take care of business. They are, I mean, I think Tech, obviously, but outside of Tech, they're probably the highest floor team in the Big 12. They're probably one of the higher floor teams nationally. And that means a lot, right? When you're able to take care of business against, average to good teams, which I think that Utah has done. But like, there are questions that I have about their ability to punch up, right? Like, I mean, again, obviously, the Tech game kind of got out of hand at the end. It was competitive. It was more competitive than the final score, certainly. I think that the BYU game was kind of the opposite. I think that BYU game was a little more dominant than maybe the final score was, with kind of a late touchdown there. So, I think that Utah, like you said, I think that they're pretty well placed where they are. I think that you kind of look at college football in these top 25 in tiers a little bit. Like, I think that, to me, there's like, right now I would put BYU in like sort of the playoff caliber tier. I think that there's 11 teams that really, I feel like, should be in the playoff right now. Obviously, they're going to be in trouble with maybe being that team out. But, I think that there's sort of that second group. You mentioned, obviously, the Miamis, you mentioned Texas, you mentioned Vanderbilt. I think that Utah is a notable step up from the next group of teams, the USCs, the Virginias, which obviously will be a team that could be in the playoff. I think that they're a clear step ahead of those teams. And to be, sort of in the bubble group as a really good team in college football, I mean, again, nobody's going to be happy about missing the playoffs, certainly, but I think that this is a really, really good season that Utah fans should be proud of.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, we were so close to cracking this field, like relatively close. I mean, we're going to talk about what this BYU team's dealing with right now and how that could affect Utah in the future. But we were 5-7 last year. Like, it's easy to forget that too. Like,
they doubled their wins.
We had 7 rushing touchdowns last year. We have 37 this year. Like, it's crazy. The leap forward this Utah team has made. Another team that's made a step forward, I don't know if it leap forward, but a step forward for sure, is the BYU Cougars. And look, they're Utah's rival, but I think this is just an interesting standpoint, because Utah would love, I hope someday Utah finds themselves in the position where they're an 11-1 team going into a conference championship game. Yes, BYU got blown out against Tech, but I don't know how I feel about a P4 conference team with just one loss being on the outside looking in, when I understand we're going to do the Oklahoma's playing well-ish right now. Obviously, their offense is something else entirely, but the defense is
Don't get me
fantastic.
started on Oklahoma. I'm going to get in trouble.
Yeah. But what do you make of it? Like, last year, it wasn't really even a thing. Like, yes, if SMU got blown out by Clemson, they would have been out, but they kept it close and they got in. They deserve to. I feel like BYU belongs in here. You can make an argument they're absolutely better than the likes of an Oklahoma and even some of those other teams in there. What do you make of this 11-1 Big 12 team on the potential missing out? Feels like it'd kind of be historic for a 12-team playoff to leave a P4 team with that record out.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think there's a couple pieces there. One, I mean, if you compare BYU's resume to Ole Miss's, it looks really similar. When you start talking about strength of record, when you start talking about strength of schedule, they actually have a higher strength of schedule and strength of record than Ole Miss does at this point. Now, what Ole Miss has is that in their game against an elite team, Georgia, they kept up. Is that the difference between 5 spots, that like they played well against Georgia? Like, that's what it feels like they're kind of arguing to us right now. I think that another part of this is, I don't think that people, including the committee, really gets how good Tech is. Yeah. I think that there's a very good case that Texas Tech is the second best team in the country behind Ohio State. I think that their defense might be the number 1 unit in the country, including Ohio State. Like, this is a really, really, really good Texas Tech team. Again, a lot of the advanced metrics kind of back that up. And so I think that's part of it, right? Is if BYU gets kind of blown out by Ohio State, maybe we're talking about them a little differently than getting blown out by Texas Tech, because Texas Tech isn't a team that you think should blow out a team and that team still be quality. I mean, again, like, with Oklahoma, for example, you mentioned them. I mean, they lose, I think the finals 23-6 to a Texas team that's outside of the top 10, but it's not really held against them in the same way, because, obviously they have that Alabama win that they managed to pull off at the last second. And then they've also got a Michigan win that I don't think Michigan's that good, but that's a whole other conversation. Right. And so, but they have like sort of name brand wins, even if they're not actually as high quality as the names may suggest. And so I think that BYU, I can't remember who brought up this stat, and I'd need to double check it myself to be sure it's accurate. But I saw a stat that BYU is the first 11-1 power conference team to finish outside of the top 10 in the playoff era. Like, it just doesn't happen. And I mean, I will say this. I think that the bubble is stronger than it's been in a couple of years, right? I think that this is a much stronger bubble than last year's was, where you were talking about a very flawed 9-3 Alabama team, a very flawed 9-3 South Carolina team. Like, I think that this bubble is a lot better. I mean, Vanderbilt at 10-2 in the SEC isn't really going to get any sort of chance, right?
Yeah.
Like, Miami with a win over Notre Dame and 2 close losses, they're not going to get a chance, right? So that's part of it, is that the bubble's a little stronger. But there's also, just to be frank, there's this love obsession that the committee has with Notre Dame as well. And you know, they, at this point, they have one ranked win. I believe it's number 18 USC at this point is, I think, what their ranking is.
Yeah, Pitt's out, I think, right?
Yeah. And so, like, that's it. That's their whole, you know, and then they're beating up bad teams. So it kind of gets to this point where it's like, okay, that's cool that Notre Dame is beating up bad teams, but if you have 2 losses and 1 sort of strong victory, and you're comparing them to a team that has 11 wins and their only loss is to a very high quality team, better than, you know, I would argue both of Notre Dame's losses. I don't know. I mean, it's just, the committee very clearly this year seems to be taking into account just like sort of the, like, you know, whether they want to call it eye test, whether they want to call it sort of advanced stats looking, whether, you know, they're just leaning on the teams that they think are better. They just think are better, as opposed to sort of the resume piece where, again, a team like BYU stacks up way stronger. So I think one question for me is going to be, let's say that BYU, I'm expecting BYU to lose the game to Tech, because I think Tech is incredible. Like, it's about Tech being incredible, not BYU not being good. But if it's a close game, if it's a down to the wire game, we've heard the committee cite repeatedly the idea that the reason that they don't value BYU to the same extent is because they were uncompetitive against Texas Tech. If they're competitive the second time around, does that change their minds? I mean, it's going to be an interesting question to figure out.
It's fascinating. And it's so interesting just how these teams are determined, because in part of me goes, okay, Mateer wasn't 100% against Texas. But does that mean we excuse the loss in a way where the BYU's 2 top 20 wins? I feel like no one mentions that. We always talk about the Utah win. Arizona's been a really good story this year. Everyone thought they were going to kind of suck this year, and they've been able to rebound and figure it out. I have another question about Utah I want to ask you in a moment, but first, just while we're on this conversation, is this the best way to do this? Like, what do you think is the best way that we select the playoff field? And is 12 even the right number?
Yeah. Trust me, we can have this conversation all off season, but I think the short answer is yes. I think it's an okay way to decide it. I think that every system has flaws. I think every selection method has flaws. I think that ultimately, like, you know, if you look right now, you know, they have like the BCS sort of equivalents today, right? And what they would rate as, like, BYU would actually be the number 11 team in a modern day BCS as well. You know, and I think they should be voted higher, but like, you're kind of running into some of the same problems, right? Again, this is a BYU team that computer wise does not rate especially well, actually maybe rates better from a resume perspective. So, you know, I mean, usually and historically, you've seen the committee really lean on that strength of record situation, right? Because that tends to be a resume ranking. BYU is an exception. They're number 6 in strength of record, but obviously they're number 1 in the ranking. So there's not necessarily a perfect, clean way to do this, I would argue. So there's always going to be teams that certainly feel like they have a better case than what they have. Now, what I will say is, I remember looking back, there's this website that calculated since 1989, the most overranked teams in the AP poll and the most underranked teams in the AP poll. And the top 5 of the most overranked are kind of who you'd expect, right? Texas, Alabama, you know, teams like that, right? The number 1 most underranked team in modern college football history was BYU. They were the single most underranked team in the AP poll when it comes to where they started the year versus where they finished the year. So this isn't new, to say the least. But, you know, the thing is too, and I spoke to BYU wide receiver Chase Robertson. I apologize, Utah listeners, that we're talking so much about BYU, but I spoke to Chase Roberts a couple weeks ago, and one thing that he said is we kind of understand like it takes time to build a brand and to build a national brand. And, we understand like last year people don't take us all that seriously. Well, this year, hopefully they take us a little bit more seriously. And we've talked about it consistently. I mean, Utah, it took years to build a brand to the point where like 2 or 3 years ago, like you're starting to talk about Utah as the team, as like a team that comes in with implicit credibility. That took years to build up. I think that BYU is reaching that point. I feel like this year they should be at that point, but whether it's short-term or long-term, I think they'll eventually get there.
It feels that way. And yeah, we have talked a lot about BYU, but I mean, this just terrifies me. Like what's happening right now? Because coming in this year, I was like, okay, if we go 11-1 and just get in the conference title game, we're for sure in, like being a Big 12 team. The precedent
I would have said that sort of team is a lock. I would.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
The precedent being set right now is that could not be the case. And that's scary if you are the Big 12, if you're Utah. Shehan, just one last thing while we're talking about this Utah team, just as we reflect on the year, I feel like Jason Beck, that hire has meant everything to this program. What have you made of the job he's done this year?
Yeah, it's been great. And I remember speaking to Kyle Whittingham about this at Big 12 Media Days. And, one thing that I kind of, asked him about was, does this feel like a return to some of the, not exact same thing, but like some of the concepts of the Urban Meyer era, where obviously they run a lot of power spread stuff. And he was like, that's exactly what we had in mind. And I think that you look at this team right now, obviously Devin Dampier is no Tim Tebow, but like, I think that, you see just a physical, tough, quick, option-based explosive offense that still feels like it fits within the identity of what Utah football is meant to be. Like it would be one thing, right? If they were to do some of the same stuff, but it's like it's chucking the ball around the yard and they're soft and they're, finesse and all this. But like, that's what I love about what they brought in with Jason Beck is it feels like they're able to take advantage of their identity in a new way. I think that what's exciting about this too is like, this is just year one of this system. I think that, as the system continues to go along, yes, obviously you're going to have to do it without some of the best offensive linemen in America, though I expect that certainly they're going to find a way to develop and recruit new, very good linemen. But like, as they get a quarterback who's more comfortable as a passer too, or if, Devin Dampier continues to grow as a passer, that's going to add a whole new level to this offense that doesn't exist already. Like there are just so many ways to build off of what Jason Beck brought in. And that's what I think is most exciting for Utah is schematically. I mean, what they're doing on offense right now, I think is revolutionary and I think has a chance to be really, really good and really, really special. So, we mentioned it off the top. We're kind of coming full circle here. Like, I think that Kyle Whittingham really wanted to make sure to leave this program in a good place when he left. Well, if Jason Beck in this system is kind of his final little tweak to Utah football, it's a pretty dang good one.
It is a pretty dang good one. Absolutely. And it's funny you talk about the Tim Tebow thing because Devin Dampier's not, but we do have a pretty electric freshman quarterback. Not Tim Tebow levels of electric, but
my Baylor Bears know all about him. Trust me.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was a wild day. But hey, Shehan, thank you so much for coming on, man. Please let everyone know what you have going on, including a tough Heisman vote, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. You can find all my work over at cbssports.com. You can follow me on all social media at Shehan Jeyarajah. Like JT mentioned, I'm excited to vote for the Heisman for the first time this year. We're picking all America teams right now. We're doing award voting for everything else as well. I just picked 16 candidates for the Broyles Award. Like we are in the thick of things right now. And then of course we're going to be on site for the Big 12 title game. Going to have a lot of content from that. Going to have a lot of content after that. It's an exciting time. This is kind of the home stretch in a lot of ways. So we'll have you covered.
It is an exciting time and always exciting when we get you on. Thank you again, Shehan.
Thank you for having me.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. Back with you tomorrow talking the latest in Utah athletics.